Hello?
That's when Ellen doesn't do it anymore.
Okay. Okay, fish heads. Yeah, you can get fish heads. You can get. Sometimes they sell. Recently, they've been selling heads of sheep. They're not refrigerated. Apparently, they're preserved in some manner that you could buy like a little box. I had never done it.
I saw one in Bingo, but it was very expensive.
Yeah.
Like $30.
For something that you're not really going to eat, right?
And that traumatize your children. That's
Right.
Okay.
Fish eye or the sheep eye? That's the sheep in Israel.
All right.
Wow.
They each their own.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So let's see what we're talking about the symbolic foods, right, that we eat for Rosh Hashanah.
One more minute. Can we do for Star Rivka, Bracha Star Rivka?
Oh yes. Yes, the outside this is the outside of Robertson was a Bracha Sar Rivka Baus. First wife of Rabbi Duff. On the outside, so we can dedicate the learning in her memory. So this is the last time we'll meet in the year 5785. And Rosh Hashanah is going to be Monday night. So we talked about preparations for Rosh Hashanah. Right now, once we get to Rosh Hashanah, I guess we all know what to do. We go to shul, follow instructions. But basically, the davening, but distinct about Rosh Hashanah, it's a Yom Tov, so we know what happens in Yom Tov. We don't work. We light candles beforehand. It's like Shabbos, with the main distinction, as with every Yom Tov, that on Rosh Hashanah, we got with unlike Shabbos and Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah is similar to all the holidays, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, and all of them. Work involving food preparation is permitted. We touched on that one or two of the previous weeks, a little while back, and the exact definition of what's called food preparation is somewhat complex, but basically, as what's familiar to most people, the cooking is permitted, lighting fires is permitted as long as you have a pre-existing flame to light from. So the whole idea of a little different on Shabbos. The whole idea is, by definition, to light the candles before Shabbos so that you have light in your home, because otherwise you can't have light in your home. On Yom Tov, it's slightly different in principle, not just in principle, but in practice. The second night of Yom Tov, we light candles after Yom Tov begins, after the second begins, and that's perfectly fine. We still make the bracha. We're still performing the mitzvah of creating light in the home. We don't have the requirement to do it before Yom Tov starts. So there is on the calendars, as there will be in the candle lighting for sun, that would be afternoon, and the same as Shabbos, 18 minutes before sunset. But there really is no need to light the candle 18 minutes before sunset if you have super on or something else that you can light something on Yom Tov. However, if you're going to strike a match, it does need to be done like the Shabbos, and you see them before Yom Tov begins. On the second night of Yom Tov, the candle lighting time is an hour later, because you can only light candles after the first day is over. Because if you lit the candles before the first day ended, it would be a preparation. It would be an act working. It would be like lighting candles on Yom Tov for a weekday. No, not. So you would need to have a yard-tight candle or a stove burner or something on. There's a notion on Rosh Hashanah.
But transferring that flame, can you literally hold the hot end of a match under the flame or not?
Yeah, you can do that.
You can do that.
Sure. Yeah. Matter of fact,
Yeah, I've heard like very.
yeah. Oh, why not?
I don't know. I don't know.
You just burnt out matches and then
Yeah. Apparently, what we've been told. Yeah, we've had this because we don't have gas in our part of the neighborhood, which was an adjustment for us. We have electric burners, and we were told on Yom Tov, if we don't have a yard-tight candle or if it goes out, you can actually hold a match to the electric heating element, and it will combust.
Oh, wow.
That's good. So there maybe there's some controversy about it. I don't know enough to tell you whether that's universal or not, but that was a suggestion that was made to us. Because it makes sense, because electricity is a big debate. When electricity was first discovered and utilized, at least was discovered by the scientists and utilized, the rabbis of the time discussed what exactly. This has got to be forbidden. We have to figure out why. So the conventional assumption of everyone is that it's fire. That's very debatable. There are other interpretations of what might be wrong with electricity. It might be a form of construction. If it is fire, the question would be, why can't you turn on an electric light in Yom Tov? I mean, other than creating a new flame, but turning on a light in principle isn't really the idea that electricity might be fire is more credible when you're lighting an incandescent light bulb. There's actually a filament that burns. Matter of fact, an incandescent light bulb, which are harder and harder to find nowadays, they say if a person's in the hospital or the airport and they can't light candles, there is a credible basis to actually make a bracha, whether it's Shabbos candles or Hanukkah candles, to use an incandescent flashlight, and I think to actually make a bracha on it, which you cannot do with LEDs or fluorescents or any of those other ones. So actually, the interesting thing, what I was told, I think if someone was in the hospital, I was told to use an incandescent bulb, but not one that plugs in. It should be like a flashlight, because somehow, if it's plugged into the wall and there's a continuous electrical supply, it doesn't resemble a candle, as opposed to a battery-powered flashlight, where it contains a limited power source. It would be similar to an oil lamp or a candle, and that really does resemble it. I think there's enough of a basis that you can actually make a bracha if it's an incandescent bulb, and you can see the burning filament. Right, but they give out sometimes. The chaplains will give out these little lights, but they don't necessarily kosher for making a bracha, because they typically, that was the issue. I think they had in this particular hospital, they might have had them, but they weren't really incandescent bulbs. So, anyways, so that's So with Rosh Hashanah, there is a notion, and it comes from the Gemara, that it's one long day. And what does that mean? Okay, I learned this when I was in Kollel. We learned it's actually in Sechas Beis, not maybe also in Rosh Hashanah. I don't know. I learned it in the Sechas Beis, and there were several pages of Talmud that went into the whole subject. And I can tell you confidently that it's very confusing. I'm not quite sure what it's about, but there's a lot of discussion as to why. We're all familiar with the 2 days, and the fact that we do everything. Not everything. I mean, not Yom Kippur, thankfully, but we do everything double. Because there was a time, but the Jewish calendar was always based on the moon, and there was a time that it was actually based on real-time sighting of the moon, and you need witnesses to show up and testify to that. And if you didn't live close to where the action was, if you were in a more outlying Jewish community, what outlying in those days, you didn't need to be so far to be outlying. Today, what's a 4-hour drive? That's just an afternoon 4-hour drive. Back then it could be days of travel. So people who weren't that close to the center of Jewish life didn't necessarily get the memo in time, and they couldn't confidently know when the holiday would begin. So they did everything double, just the Seder tonight. They knew within one day because you knew when the moon. It's not if it's the 16th of the month, that we still got a way to look up at the sky. You see the moon is almost full. But once the moon starts to disappear, then it does disappear, and then when will it reappear? Or when will somebody see it reappear and be able to state that in presence of a court? You didn't necessarily know. So you knew the Seder was going to be tonight or tomorrow, but you couldn't really be sure which. Imagine planning a Seder like that. We're used to it. We're going to plan 2 Seders, and we'll imagine we're going to plan the Seder, but we're just not sure if it's going to be today or tomorrow. So, in terms of the guests and the menu and the clothing, and we'll just we're scheduling the wedding. We're not sure if it's going to be today or tomorrow, but we'll just do everything double. That's basically what it was. Now, you'll notice something interesting, right? When we have a double day, like we do on Pesach, which is kind of the real day in terms of the calendar. The first day. Pesach begins on the 15th of the month. Look at the calendar and see what is the night of the first day of the 15th of Nisan. When is the first night of Sukkot? 15th of Tishrei. It's the real day, so to speak, is always the first day. With Rosh Chodesh, the real day is always the second day, right? With Rosh Chodesh, right? With Rosh Hashanah, like the other holidays, the real day is the first day. Right. Yeah, Rosh Hashanah is the only, and Rosh Chodesh are the only time that in Israel they also do too. So, I think the basic difference between the reason, with the other holidays, Pesach, Shavuot, the issue was that certain communities lived too far to know exactly when the holiday would begin. So, in addition to the actual day, they didn't get information in time. So, in addition, they always did a second day, and we continue that practice. You could be in the temple and the headroom was 10 feet away from you. They themselves didn't know, and they had to begin by observing the first day as Rosh Hashanah because this did not show up. So I think the idea was that it was more built into the system that it wasn't kind of an accident of circumstances or uncertainty. It was, by definition, it had to be set up that this is the way Rosh Hashanah is observed as a 2-day holiday. So probably grossly oversimplifying, hopefully not distorting what the Gemara says. That leads us to the idea that on Rosh Hashanah is actually, unlike Pesach, where it's like, well, we're not real. Some communities weren't so sure. They did everything twice just in case. And Rosh Hashanah, it actually became, Rosh Hashanah is observed as a 48-hour period, one long day. So what does that mean? So in case you had any hopes up, it does not make your life any easier. So, for example, there are certain things that you can do on a 2-day Yom Tov. I'm not going to be able to come up with any really good practical examples, but what? Right. So that's an example, right? But I'll get to that in a second. But before that, just in concept. So they talk about the egg, like Masechet Beit or Be'ah. It's like it begins with the famous case of the egg that's laid on Yom Tov. So the idea is, if an egg is laid on the first day of Yom Tov, you can eat it on the second day of Yom Tov. Why? Because not both days are Yom Tov. One is and one isn't. If the first day was Yom Tov, the egg was laid on Yom Tov, but then the second day isn't no Yom Tov anymore. You can eat the egg. When the first day wasn't Yom Tov and the egg wasn't laid on Yom Tov, and you can eat it on the second day. That kind of thinking doesn't work on Rosh Hashanah, because Rosh Hashanah, rabbinically at least, is considered a 48-hour Yom Tov. So any of these kind of either or calculations don't really work. Rosh Hashanah is a 48-hour period. Another thing that my wife mentioned was that the medicine calculation. So there's almost nothing that makes this. We treat the second day of Yom Tov as a full day of Yom Tov in almost everything. There's no leniency. I mean, I'm not talking about movements that want to abolish the second day entirely, but even we don't do anything. Typically speaking, with rabbinic legislation has leniency that don't apply to Torah law, but we do the whole 9 yards with the second day of Yom Tov. We don't treat it any more leniency, except for one or two very, very minor things. First of all, Rabbi Edelman always used a slightly earlier time for end of Yom Tov on the second day of Yom Tov. And what he did, and I'm not sure, maybe he would have done it on the first day too, because Yom Tov is a little bit more lenient than Shabbos. But for the second day of Yom Tov, I know that he did 50 instead of 60. But one thing I have to do with funerals, which is hopefully not relevant, and the other thing is for medicine. So medications are restricted. A lot of medications are forbidden to be used on Shabbos and Yom Tov or out of rabbinic restrictions, because medical treatments often involve biblical forms of prohibited work. If you ever seen the emblem for the pharmacy, the mortar and the pestle, so that is exactly what the rabbis said. They said you can't make medicine because it leads to grinding. That's how you make medicine. That's the exact rule the rabbis were concerned about. And as a general rule, medicine is forbidden, although there's a number of exceptions when a person is quite ill or not ill at all, or it's kind of thing that there are, but basically taking medicine is problematic on Shabbos and Yom Tov. On the second day Yom Tov, it's okay. Anything that if there is no work involved, if the only prohibition is the rabbinic restriction of taking medicine, just a question of popping a pill, you have to think twice before doing that on Shabbos or Yom Tov. But on the second day, you don't have to think about it at all. You can pop any pill you want, because that's pretty much the only leniency that's readily relevant to us on the second. But so on the second day Yom Tov, that's the thing. The second day Yom Tov, it's okay. But on Rosh Hashanah, it doesn't work, because Rosh Hashanah, it's not a second day. The second day Yom Tov is lenient if and when it's done out of doubt. And today we really do know. We just act like we don't know, and we really know that it's the first day. But Rosh Hashanah doesn't work that way. It is a definite rabbinic enactment to observe 2 days, and there's no, well, it might be this, it might be that. It is.
We're allowed to take maintenance medications. Like blood pressure.
Yeah, well, first of all, anything, a person is ill, they can take medication. So ill is defined as bedridden, and bedridden is defined as you need to lie down, like you can't really function. And I imagine something that's supposed to regulate blood pressure, you don't have to wait till you become ill. If it's also preventive medicine is also okay. It's another thing. A person's perfectly healthy. Right? Vitamins is an issue, right? But preventive medicine, like I might get a headache. Let me take the Tylenol before you feel the headache coming on, and that's another. Yeah. So if you're sick enough that you have to lie down, you can take the medicine. And if you're not sick at all and you want to just head it off, that's also okay. If it's
take my blood pressure medication,
then you get sick. Yeah. So no, and that's danger to life. Forget it. Danger to life. You could eat pork and ham if you need to, like that. And if another thing is a course of treatment. So there might be different opinions, but I think the accepted practice is antibiotics. You're on a 10-day antibiotics, so you feel better after 24 hours, but you're not supposed to stop in the middle. You could continue taking it on Shabbos. Those are all leniencies that are allowed. There's a lot of allowances. Children, it's because children are considered vulnerable and they're in the category of ill.
No, we're old people.
Are we not also considered vulnerable?
Right. Like they said in yeshiva, you study in yeshiva, you go to kollel, and when you come, then you come back to the senior kollel. In between, you spend a few years working. But most of your life, you just spend in yeshiva. So most of our lives we're vulnerable and at risk. That's the whole message of Rosh Hashanah. We're always vulnerable and at risk.
I must have blanked out. So why is it that Rosh Hashanah, the 2 days is like one day?
So that was my disclaimer was. That was what I said. I didn't really understand it either, but I did it in yeshiva. It was a long and complicated discussion. I think the basic idea was that because Rosh Hashanah, the concern was a slightly different one, or it was a more fundamental concern that there was no way, even the members of the Sanhedrin themselves didn't know and couldn't know. So it was instituted as a. All right. Right. And it's like, it's like they're in the temple and they have to know what song should the Levians sing when they're they had to figure out a system. So they just said this is the system. Rosh Hashanah is a 2-day holiday. That was, I think, the roughly the concept. They said it's not just we live far away. We've got to come up with a solution. It was like this is the way Rosh Hashanah is supposed to be observed. And what that leads to is a famous thing that I think it gets confusing, but this is really the root of the new fruit. It has nothing to do with. I can't say it has nothing. There probably are symbolisms about New Year, new fruit. That's not really what it's about officially. The new fruit is there because on every Yom Tov we say Shehecheyanu, and Shehecheyanu is Hashem has given us life and kept us and preserved us to this time, and that's the bracha that we say anytime we reach a milestone or we celebrate something special that only comes on occasion. So it could be something personal, like I got a new expensive item of clothing or jewelry, something beautiful and special. It could be certain mitzvahs that are rare and special. Again, so we blow the shofar for the first time of the year. We shake the lulav for the first time of the year. We light the Hanukkah candles, and then there's also on the time itself. So there's a bracha of Shehecheyanu for a holiday. A holiday arrives, you make a Shehecheyanu. So for Hanukkah, for example, we do double duty. When we light the menorah on the first night, we're making Shehecheyanu on the menorah. I believe we're also making it on other days. If I'm not mistaken, if a person, God forbid, had no access to a menorah, you still make a Shehecheyanu because the time has arrived. And in many cases, we make 2 Shecheyanus. So, for example, on Rosh Hashanah, on the first night, we make a Shehecheyanu because it's a new holiday. And on the first morning, we make a Shehecheyanu on the shofar. Same thing with the sukkah and lulav. There's a question of why not make a Shehecheyanu on the sukkah itself, but we certainly don't need to because we have others. But the lulav, certainly we shake it on the first morning, we make a Shehecheyanu on that. And we also made a Shehecheyanu the night before on a holiday. Now, typically, a woman might make that bracha when she's lighting the candles. A man might make the bracha during the kiddush. You're not supposed to do both. So that's why they say that if a woman made the Shehecheyanu when she lit the candles, she should not answer Amen to the Shehecheyanu of the person who's making the kiddush. Although I don't think it invalidates the kiddush if you do it by accident. But or you can leave the Shehecheyanu out and just be okay. But I think it depends on a matter of custom, and you should do what your practice is. The wife of the Smara. There was a famous commentator on Shulchan Aruch who quotes his wife, I haven't weighed in on a subject based on her knowledge or her tradition. She gets
according to her, there is a strong tradition. Therefore, you're not supposed to break it.
Right. So
second night you also.
So that's it. So now on a typical Yom Tov again, so you make a Shehecheyanu on both nights. Now let's say Pesach, right? That would be a good example, or maybe the only example. You make a Shehecheyanu at the first Seder night and the second Seder night, right? But not on the 7th night, not on the 8th night. Why? Because Pesach is a holiday. It needs a Shehecheyanu because it's a holiday. Perhaps Matzah might need a Shehecheyanu as well, but it doesn't need to because you're eating it that night anyways. I don't know if that's, but whatever. You definitely need a Shehecheyanu on the holiday. You need to make 1. So why do we make 2? Because we're not sure, quote unquote, we're unsure which night is the real night, and we make 2. Why don't we make a Shechianu on the seventh night? Because that's not new. It's part of the same holiday. We had Chol Hamoed in between. Right? How many Shechianus do we make on Sukkot? So we make 5. So the first night and the second night, that's really 1. It would be a Shechianu at the beginning of the holiday. We don't know again, quote unquote, which day. So we make a Shechianu on both first night and second night. We make 1 for the Lulav. Now you might say we should do it twice, right? First day, second day. It doesn't work that way because when it comes to, I guess the thinking there is when it comes to the lulav, it's really on the lulav. There's only a first time. You can only be a first time once. When the first time you shake the lulav, you're doing a mitzvah. It's a little subtle, but when you're making a shachano on the time, and we're acting as though the time itself is uncertain, which is the first day, you make the shachano twice. When you're making the shachano on the object, on the lulav, there's only going to be one first time that you pick it up. It's not like when the twins were born, people said 2 pidyon event. No, it's only one kid gets the pidyon event. Same thing with with the shofar, right? We only make a shachyan the first time we blow shofar, not the second time. Now, there's 2 more shachianos in Sukkot for a grand total of 5. Why? Because the 8th day and the 9th day, Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. That's because, according to the Torah, Shmini Atzeres is a separate holiday, even though it's attached to Sukkot. So it's not really. So unlike the 7th day of Pesach, which is just the end of Pesach, the 8th day of Sukkot is not the end of Sukkot. It's a separate holiday, different structure of temple service, different name. And we do it again twice, once on the 8th night, once on the 9th night, Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah, because we're quote unquote unsure, since we have a grand total of 5 shachianos on Sukkot. First night, second night, 7th night, 8th night, and the first time we shake the lulav. Now on Rosh Hashanah, we make 3 shachianos. First night, second night, and the first time that we blow the shofar. The thing is, with the second night, it is a little bit problematic to make a shechianu because, again, the rabbis created this concept of the 48-day holiday, the definite holiday, which means that the second night of Rosh Hashanah is not new. Now, it is in a certain sense, but it's debatable. So we make a shechianu, that's the bottom line. It is definitely something that we do, but it's a little bit harder to justify calling it new, a little bit harder than it would be on any other holiday when it's definitely just a question of being, again, quote unquote, unsure. On Rosh Hashanah, we're not really unsure. So because we treat it definitively as a one-day holiday, the kind of solution to make it better is to have some other reason to make a shechianu on the second night. And that's why on the second night we bring a new fruit to the table. And the rule is that to make the shechianu, in theory, as soon as you obtain the new fruit, even before you eat it, so you can make the shechianu during the kiddush. But it's one of these things that's just meant to make it better. It's not required. It's actually the truth is that I asked about this, and today we would rarely, if ever, make a shechianu on a new fruit, because the idea of shechianu, remember, is as to something seasonal, something special. And we live in a time. I remember this was actually very striking to me. I went to Eretz Israel and we went to Tveria to the grave of the Rambam, and at the Rambam's grave they have a whole memorial, and there's a stone slab with some engravings from some of Rambam's writings. And they have this excerpt where he talks about the Moshe Mashiach, the days of Mashiach. He talks about it's going to be a time of peace and prosperity, and all delicacies will be kind of insignificant or meaningless at that time. And it struck me that you can go to the poorest neighborhood and the poorest. Rashi says in what Rabbi Trapper said in Europe, when someone was dying, they would give them an orange. They should be able to taste an orange before they left the world. But Rashi says when Rivka was trying to find out why she was having such a difficult pregnancy, and she was told you'll have 2 mighty nations and 2 warring forces within your midst, and Rashi says these 2 mighty kings refers to Rebbe and Antoninus. Rebbe was Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, the author of the Mishnah, who was, we know, very wealthy and powerful, a descendant of the Davidic dynasty, and in his day he had great prosperity and great wealth and power, and he was able to write the Mishnah. And even though they were under the Romans, but he had enough, it was a peaceful time. Even though the temple had been destroyed, they were under Roman rule, but he had personally a great deal of authority and prestige, and he was good friends with the Roman emperor of the time, Antoninus. And it says both of them, they were like the harmonious twins. One was the representative of Asa, the Roman emperor. One was representative of Yaakov, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. They were both so wealthy that neither of them lacked lettuce or radishes on their table, summer or winter alike. So I guess the lettuce is a summer vegetable and the radish is a winter vegetable, and that was the sign of the prophecy that was given to Rivka about the two glorious nations in her womb, was that these people they can have any kind of we say it's Shabbos. What's today? February 13th. Okay, let's go to Stop and Shop. I need radishes and lettuce for my salad for Shabbos. You go there 10 minutes before candlelight in your home in time to make your salad, and it doesn't mean anything to us. And the poorest person in the world can afford that. So, like what Rambam writes about the Messianic era, it's like we take it for granted. And we complain about all the things that we don't have. But that's why we would really, if ever, make a shechianu on a new fruit, because it has to be seasonal. And we can pretty much get